Finn lived in a quiet village, nestled high up on the misty slopes of empty Gale. Every morning, he rose early to tend to his flock of sheep, his world bounded by the rolling hills and green meadows that stretched into the sky. Finn was a simple man, untroubled by the world beyond the village, or the whisper of strange happenings in far-off places. His life was routine, predictable, until, one morning, something utterly out of the ordinary happened. It was early spring, and the earth was beginning to wake from its winter slumber. As he led his sheep along the narrow path by the river, he noticed a figure in the distance. A woman, her head bent low, sowing seeds into the soil. But what seeds, he wondered, for her hands didn't seem to hold anything at all. Curious, he squinted against the sun, trying to make out the figure more clearly. She was unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Her long hair was an impossible shade of silver, gleaming like polished platinum in the morning light. Her skin seemed to shimmer as if kissed by stardust, and her clothes, they were woven from the finest material he'd ever seen, catching the light in ways that seemed almost magical. Finn's steps slowed as he approached her, his curiosity battling with a sense of awe that kept him at a distance. She worked gracefully, her hands moving in a rhythm that was mesmerizing, as if each motion held a secret dance only she could perform. The air around her seemed warmer, carrying the faintest scent of something exotic, like night-blooming flowers under a strange sky. Finally, she looked up, meeting his gaze with eyes the color of the deepest ocean. She didn't seem startled or even surprised. In fact, she tilted her head and gave him a smile that was warm, welcoming, and just a little mischievous. "Good morning," she said, her voice as soft as the breeze yet with a hint of something unfamiliar, an accent that lingered on each word. Finn felt his heart skip a beat, the way it did whenever he got too close to the cliff's edge. "Good morning," he managed to reply, though he sounded breathless to his own ears. I don't believe I've seen you around here before." "Oh," she said with a laugh, low and musical. "That's because I've only just arrived. My name is Lyra." She swept her hand through the air, gesturing to the field around them as if she were painting the landscape herself. "I come from somewhere far away." "Far away?" he echoed, feeling foolish and enchanted all at once. He could sense there was more to her words, some meaning he wasn't quite catching. "Yes," she said, with a glint of mischief in her eyes. "From a place in the sky, you might say. And tell me, Finn, do you always stare at strangers who come to your village?" Blushing, he tore his gaze away, his cheeks burning. Well, it's not every day that a stranger as striking as you visits." She laughed again, a sound that made the morning feel brighter, and took a few steps closer to him. "Good. I like when people notice." She winked, and he felt his face grow even warmer. "What are you planting?" he asked, hoping to distract himself from the strange thrill that her presence brought. "Stars," she said, her tone light but her gaze steady. "The seeds of stars. They'll grow, and one day they'll bloom into something you've never seen before." Finn couldn't help but laugh, though he could feel the magic of her words settling around him. A stranger planting stars on his mountain, and yet, somehow, he believed her. Finn found himself drawn to Lyra like a moth to a flame. Everything about her, from her otherworldly beauty to the quiet confidence in her gaze, was like nothing he'd ever known. She continued planting her invisible seeds, moving with a grace that seemed almost unreal, her hands drifting like wisps of smoke. "Why here?" he asked after a few minutes, unable to shake his curiosity. "Why come all this way to plant stars?" She paused, her eyes turning to the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip, casting the first strokes of evening gold across the sky. Why here?" She turned her gaze to him, her smile softening. "Because every world has its lonely places, don't you think? And I have a fondness for them. They have room for magic, and for the unusual." She touched his arm, just for a second, but it sent a spark of warmth through him. Finn swallowed, feeling like his heart had leapt to his throat. "Lonely places, sure," he managed. "But how do you know where they are?" She leaned close, her eyes glinting with playful mystery. "A good traveler knows how to follow a trail, and this mountain is full of them." Her gaze turned thoughtful, and she pointed to the stars beginning to emerge in the twilight sky. "There are patterns in the stars, Finn. Paths to be found if you know how to look. I've never thought of the stars as anything but lights in the sky," Finn admitted, feeling a bit foolish but too fascinated to care. "Then let me show you something." She turned and raised her hands to the sky, tracing shapes with her fingers. As she did, the stars seemed to twinkle brighter, aligning themselves in a way Finn had never noticed before. It was as if they were dancing, shifting at her command. He stared, open-mouthed, as she continued, the stars casting faint shadows over the land, her movements graceful and mesmerizing. When she looked back at him, her eyes sparkled with that same playful mischief. "Where I come from," she whispered. "The stars listen when you ask them to dance." And just like that, she twirled, taking a step closer to him, her hands outstretched. "Would you like to join me?" Finn felt an irresistible pull. He took her hand, letting her lead him into a dance that felt like a dream. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them beneath the shimmering sky. He laughed, surprised at himself, but too enchanted to care. And as they danced under the stars, he realized he was beginning to see them differently, like old friends he was meeting for the first time. As they danced under the stars, Finn felt as if time itself had paused, the mountains' familiar slopes and shadows fading into the background. His hand was warm in Lyra's delicate grasp, and every now and then, her laughter rang out like music he'd never heard before. When they finally stopped, he was breathless, the night's cool air only heightening the strange excitement bubbling within him. Lyra smiled, her gaze steady as she tilted her head, studying him as if seeing deep into his thoughts. "Tell me, Finn," she said, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Do you ever wonder what else is out there, beyond the stars you know?" Finn looked away, feeling suddenly shy. "Maybe sometimes, but life here is simple. It's quiet. I thought I didn't need anything more." Lyra took a step closer, her hand lightly brushing his arm, sending a rush of warmth through him. "But what if you could see more? What if you could touch the stars themselves?" Finn laughed softly. "Touch the stars? I think that's a bit out of reach for a shepherd like me." "Not as far as you might think," she said, her voice lowering into a soft, secretive tone. "Sometimes the stars come closer than you know." There was something almost hypnotic in her gaze, and before he knew it, he'd drawn closer, captivated by the mystery and wonder she seemed to carry with her. He wanted to know more, needed to know more. What is it like where you're from?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lyra's eyes softened, and she looked up at the sky, as if seeing her home hidden somewhere in the vastness above. "It's a place where night never fully ends, where the skies are a tapestry of colors you'd never believe. And time flows differently there. The people know things you could never imagine, and the air, it hums with music that's woven into every breath." She turned back to him, and her expression shifted, becoming almost wistful. "But it can be lonely, even in a world of wonders. Sometimes it's nice to come somewhere quiet, somewhere real." Finn felt his heart ache a little at the tenderness in her voice. He could sense something hidden in her words, a longing that mirrored his own, a yearning for something more, something he'd never dared to name. Before he could stop himself, he reached out and took her hand again, feeling the soft warmth of her skin against his. "Stay here a while then," he said, the words surprising him with their own urgency. "There's plenty of room on this mountain for both of us." She gave him a look that was both warm and mischievous. "Maybe I will," she murmured, her fingers intertwining with his. And with that, they stood together in the quiet, their breaths mingling in the night air, the stars watching them like silent witnesses. As the first blush of dawn began to color the sky, Finn and Lyra were still on the mountainside, talking and laughing softly, wrapped in the gentle warmth of each other's company. It was as if they had slipped into a secret world where the morning had no urgency, and they could stay just like this forever. Finally, as the sun crested over the horizon, Lyra turned to him, her platinum hair catching the sunlight and casting an ethereal glow. She looked almost fragile, like some kind of dream that might vanish if he blinked. "Tell me, Finn," she said, her voice soft but playful. "Have you ever wondered about magic?" He hesitated. "Well, the stories around here are full of magic, but I've never seen it myself. Maybe you just haven't been looking in the right places," she replied, her eyes glinting with a secret. She lifted her hand, and in it she held a small, shimmering orb, no bigger than a pebble. It pulsed with a soft blue light, casting strange shadows over her face. "What is that?" he whispered, reaching out to touch it, but she held it just out of his reach, a teasing smile on her lips. "A little piece of my world," she said. "It's a stardrop, a spark of life from my home." She held it closer to him, the glow intensifying, as if it responded to his curiosity. As he watched, the stardrop seemed to pulse, releasing a wave of warmth and light. He felt something stir deep within him, a sense of wonder he hadn't known he could feel. For a moment, he saw visions of strange lands and starry skies in her eyes, a glimpse into a place far beyond anything he'd imagined. "Keep it," she said, pressing it into his hand, her touch lingering. "As long as you hold it, you'll carry a piece of my world with you." Finn's fingers closed around the stardrop, feeling its warmth seep into his skin, as if it were alive. His heart hammered, and he looked up at her, his words catching in his throat. Lyra's gaze softened, and she leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You may be just a shepherd, Finn, but you've got a rare soul, a heart that sees more than most." She brushed her fingertips lightly along his cheek, her touch electric, leaving a trail of warmth that lingered long after she'd pulled away. "And that," she murmured, "is magic enough." Finn felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, amazement, and something deeper that he couldn't quite name. He wanted to say something, to find words to capture the magic of the moment, but all he could do was hold her gaze, feeling as if he were falling into her endless, starry depths. And in that moment, he realized he didn't care where she was from or what mysteries she carried. He only knew that he wanted her to stay, to keep this feeling alive a little longer. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra smiled, that mischievous glint returning. "Perhaps," she said. "If you look to the stars, maybe you'll find me." And with that, she slipped away, leaving him standing alone on the mountainside, the stardrop warm in his hand and a feeling in his heart that he would never be able to forget. After Lyra disappeared into the morning mist, Finn stood alone on the mountainside, clutching the stardrop in his hand. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, warming his palm. He'd never held anything like it, a piece of another world, gifted to him by a woman who seemed as elusive as a shadow. As he made his way back to the village, he felt the weight of it in his pocket, a constant reminder of the strange and wonderful encounter that felt more like a dream than reality. Throughout the day, he caught himself reaching for it, brushing his fingers against its warmth. When he did, he would see flashes, tiny bursts of light, like sparks of starlight or glimpses of Lyra's otherworldly world. That night, as he lay in bed, he held the stardrop up to the moonlight. It shimmered, casting a soft glow across his room. To his surprise, it seemed to hum, a quiet, soothing sound, like a distant melody that only he could hear. In the following days, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Sometimes, while tending his flock or walking through the fields, he would feel a tingle at the back of his neck, as if someone's eyes were on him. He'd glance around, hoping to see Lyra, but she was never there. Instead, the villagers began to notice something different about him. They'd stop him in the street, their eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Finn," the blacksmith said one afternoon, scratching his head, "there's something strange about you lately. You look brighter, almost. Like you're glowing." The baker's wife nodded as she passed by, her gaze lingering on him. "Aye, and he's been smiling more too. As if he's seen something we haven't." Finn laughed it off, though he felt a warm thrill in his chest. He wanted to tell them about Lyra, to share his strange, beautiful secret, but something held him back. It felt too precious to speak of, too fragile to let loose in a world that might not understand. And yet, the more he thought about her, the more he longed to see her again. Each evening, he climbed to the top of the mountain, watching the stars emerge one by one, hoping to catch a glimpse of her silvery hair, her shimmering clothes, or her playful smile. But night after night, the mountains remained quiet, and he began to wonder if he had only imagined her. But then, one evening, as he sat on the mountain ledge, the stardrop in his hand began to glow. Its light grew brighter and brighter, casting strange, shifting shadows on the rocks around him. He held it up, watching in awe as it pulsed in his hand, almost like a beacon. And then he heard her voice, soft as the night wind. "Finn!" He turned, his heart leaping, and there she was, stepping out of the darkness, her platinum hair catching the moonlight, her blue eyes fixed on him with a gentle smile. "I see you found your way," she murmured, her gaze flicking to the stardrop in his hand. He rose, unable to hide his joy. "I hoped you'd come back." Her smile widened, and she held out her hand. "Then show me this mountain of yours, Finn. Let's see where it takes us." And as he took her hand, he felt that familiar thrill, like stepping into a dream where anything was possible. Hand in hand, Finn and Lyra walked along the mountain's winding paths, their steps light as if they were walking on air. The world around them felt alive with quiet magic. The leaves rustled in the trees, the stars above seemed closer, brighter, almost listening to their every word. "So?" Finn asked after a while, glancing at her. Is it true you're planting stars here? He smiled, half joking, yet hoping she'd say yes. Lyra laughed, her voice lilting in the darkness. I might be. Stars can take root in the strangest places. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Besides, your world could use a few new ones, don't you think? Finn grinned, feeling a little bolder. I suppose we could. Though I never thought I'd be helping someone from the stars with their gardening. Lyra stopped suddenly, turning to face him with a smile that held a glint of mischief. Oh, but you have something rare, Finn. Not many people would believe in such things, let alone help plant them. Finn felt his cheeks heat up. Well, it's hard not to believe when you're here. Lyra's expression softened, and she brushed a strand of hair from his face, her touch gentle and lingering. That's why I like this mountain, she murmured. It's quiet, but there's an openness here. You're open to the extraordinary. They continued walking, talking softly, with Lyra sharing tales of her world, a place of endless night skies and shimmering lights, where people sailed on streams of stardust and music drifted through the air like the scent of flowers. Finn listened, captivated, hanging on her every word. Her world sounded like a dream, beautiful and strange and unlike anything he'd ever known. Eventually, they reached a cliffside overlooking the valley below. Lyra released his hand and stepped forward, spreading her arms wide as if to embrace the stars. Her eyes closed, and Finn watched as her face softened, her features bathed in the moon's silvery glow. He found himself lost in the sight of her. She looked like a goddess of the night, ethereal and luminous, as if she belonged to the stars themselves. Do you ever miss it? He asked quietly. Your home? She opened her eyes, her gaze distant. Sometimes. But my people, they understand the need to wander, to see the universe beyond our skies. Some of us are explorers by nature. I wouldn't give this up, not for anything. She turned to him, her eyes bright with emotion. And sometimes I think I was meant to come here, to meet someone like you. Finn's heart skipped a beat, his pulse racing as he took a step closer. And what does that mean? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra smiled, her gaze warm and teasing. It means that sometimes, the stars know what they're doing when they lead us somewhere. Before he could reply, she lifted her hand, and a soft blue light appeared in her palm, just like the star drop she'd given him. She leaned in, the light illuminating her face, casting her features in a gentle glow. Finn, she whispered, her voice almost trembling. Would you let me show you something? He nodded, his heart thundering in his chest. And as she touched the star drop to his forehead, he felt a rush of warmth, like 1,000 tiny sparks lighting up inside him. Visions flooded his mind, stars and distant worlds, colors he couldn't name, sounds like the ringing of ancient bells. And in that moment, he felt connected to something vast and beautiful, a universe that went on forever, filled with mystery and wonder. When he opened his eyes, he found her watching him, her smile soft and knowing. No, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You carry a piece of my world too. They stood there, silent, the night stretching around them like a veil, their hands still entwined as they gazed at each other under the stars. Over the next few days, Finn and Lyra met every evening. They explored hidden trails, wandered through moonlit meadows, and shared stories, him about the village, her about starscapes and sky gardens. Their connection grew, a bond woven from laughter, wonder, and something deeper that neither of them needed to name. Each night, the star drop she had given him glowed a little brighter, as if responding to the magic they shared. One evening, as they sat by the river, she leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. Finn, would you ever leave this place? Travel beyond what you know? He hesitated. I don't know. Maybe, if there was a reason. She smiled, her hand resting lightly on his. And if I was that reason? He felt his heart leap. Then yes, he whispered, holding her gaze. Yes, I would. That night, the air was thick with anticipation as they walked back. Near his cottage, she stopped, turning to him, her gaze intense. Without a word, she reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Would you want to see my world, Finn? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, her face inches from his. Yes, he breathed. And then, as if drawn together by some invisible force, he kissed her, tasting starlight and sweetness, feeling as if he were falling into an endless sky. When they pulled away, her cheeks were flushed, her smile dazzling. Tomorrow, she whispered. Meet me at the peak. I'll show you everything. The next night, Finn climbed to the peak, the star drop pulsing in his pocket. When he arrived, she was already there, her silvery hair aglow in the moonlight. She held out her hand, and he took it without hesitation. "I'll open a door between worlds," she murmured. "But only for a moment. Are you ready?" He nodded, his heart pounding. She closed her eyes, and suddenly, the stars above twisted and shifted, forming a shimmering portal that pulsed with vibrant colors. "Come with me," she whispered. And together they stepped into the light, leaving his world behind. They emerged into a realm of glittering light, surrounded by celestial gardens, floating islands, and skies painted in hues he had no names for. Lyra led him through fields of flowers that glowed like stars, lakes that shimmered with reflections of distant galaxies. "This is incredible," he breathed. She smiled, wrapping her arms around him. "This is my home, Finn. And now you're part of it." They stayed there, wrapped in each other's warmth, until the starlight began to fade. When it was time to leave, she pressed her hand over his heart. "Carry this with you, always," she whispered, her touch sending a pulse of warmth through him. And he knew, without a doubt, that he was forever changed. Back in his world, Finn awoke alone on the mountain peak, the star drops still glowing in his hand. Lyra was gone, but he could feel her presence within him, as if a piece of her world had taken root in his heart. As he returned to the village, he noticed something else, a new life growing inside him, a gift from her, a spark of stardust. He smiled, gazing up at the sky, knowing that Lyra was watching from somewhere far away, waiting for the day when they might meet again. And as the first stars of evening appeared, he made a silent promise, one he knew she could hear. "Until we meet again, Lyra." And with that, he returned to his quiet life, a shepherd no longer alone, carrying the love of a woman from the stars and a spark of magic that would live on forever. Thank you to those who listened. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like and comment on this video. I am interested in your opinion. See you all soon.